All right, so just a little background and reminder from our last Buffalo County Early Childhood Collaborative. We had some discussion with our child care providers on some of the challenges that we've been seeing with needing to raise employee wages, but then also seeing the challenges that causes when it comes to needing to raise family rates. And so there's kind of this push and shove on, do I retain staff or do I retain families? And just those hard decisions that childcare providers are needing to make here in Buffalo County. So we asked today, as you're listening through this presentation of the co-op childcare model concept, just to be thinking about the things that we've talked about here in Buffalo County, some of the challenges you've seen as a child care provider, early childhood professional, and what you'd like to see in this community, and really see if this concept is something that would benefit you. So as you're listening, I know Cindy will drop some questions to be asking yourself throughout the presentation, and then we'll stop at the end and discuss and provide some time for questions. So without any more prefacing, I will introduce Cindy Holden, and she will talk a little bit more about the child care co-op concept.
Thanks, Tana. My name is Cindy Holden. I am a cooperative development specialist with the Nebraska Cooperative Development Center. We are housed in the Department of Agriculture Economics at UNL, but I happen to be officed in Kearney. And in a past life, I was actually a member of one of the steering teams for Buffalo County Community Partners. So I've seen Tana's name quite a bit in my past world. Anyway, I am going to throw some questions into the chat that I just want all of you to think about as we go through our presentation. These are questions that we ask groups to think about, but just kind of keep them on your forefront, as well as, like Tana said, if any questions come up during our presentation, throw them in the chat. We'll do our best to get them answered within this time period. If we can't answer them today, we will get you an answer. Now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce the director of the Nebraska Cooperative Development Center, Charlotte Nargis. Charlotte happens to be in Lincoln, and she is kind of our lead on childcare. So I'm going to have her take over.
Thanks, Cindy. Cindy and I are colleagues that have been working together. It's going on, starting 5 years now in the cooperative world. And one of the things that Cindy wanted me just to mention is, why are we in childcare? I'd like to first, or even exploring the cooperative model. We've worked a lot with forming rural grocery stores. NCDC helps groups that are interested in forming a cooperative by guiding them through the process. This is through exploration to planning, implementation to forming. And childcare is a new model that we started exploring about 6-7 months ago, and largely because of C4K and Jeff Yost with the Nebraska Community Foundation. They're asking us to understand more about how, if a childcare cooperative would work in Nebraska, and whether or not our laws allow, which is part of working at, and also what that would look like. And so over the last 6 months and 7 months, we've been learning more. And part of the way that we've been doing this is we had the opportunity to contract with the California Center for Cooperative Developments. They've been doing research on childcare cooperatives for well over 20 years. And so we feel very fortunate that we can share some of that information today to give you during this overview. And now communities such as yourself are exploring it, and we're learning with you. I would say Cindy has had children in childcare, or a child in childcare, so she knows more than I'm an aunt. I do not have, besides dog care, I cannot say that I have the exact experience that I'm just being upfront that we're really learning together. Although, and so that's why it's so important to have the providers. You know your business, know who you are. You are the experts that work with us. As you're going to see in the examples, when we share those, every community organizes differently. But the principles that, as Cindy talks about what a cooperative is, follow. And I just think, so as even the questions that Cindy's asked, it is something that you, if you decide to form a cooperative, you design that yourselves. And we work with guiding questions and help you to move forward. And again, as Cindy said, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And I'm going to turn it back over to Cindy to start going through the agenda for today. Did I miss anything, Cindy, in the intro? Oop, you're muted, Cindy.
Unmute. There it went. Perfect. No, not that I'm aware of, Charlotte. I'll get my PowerPoint turned back on. I muted myself because I have a dog that likes to hang out and he was being very loud. I just think he's going to be quiet now. Anyway, so what we kind of want to talk to you about is the definition of a cooperative, who the stakeholders are, different childcare cooperative models that we've become familiar with. And then probably, in my opinion, Charlotte might differ with me on this, but Charlotte's been working in the community of Norfolk with a childcare cooperative that is forming, and kind of going through the questions they went through and how it could work for you if you wanted to explore this model. And then most importantly, your questions. So what is a cooperative? A cooperative, by definition, is a user-owned and controlled business formed to benefit its member owners. So, unlike a traditional corporation, multiple individuals come together to form the cooperative. They each invest the same amount of capital if there's an investment, and they make the decisions democratically, which means one member, one vote. The power within the co-op isn't determined by the amount of capital you invest. It's determined by meeting the membership regulations. When we talk about membership benefit, the members of the co-op receive the direct benefits. And it's based on their use of the cooperative, not the amount of capital they invested. I always use the example of, a lot of us have mutual funds. I get the benefit based on the amount of money I put into my mutual fund. Within a cooperative, it's not based on cash, it's based on use. We do a lot of work with cooperative grocery stores in Nebraska. Their benefits are based on how much they purchase from the cooperative within the grocery store. Childcares have a little bit different structure, which Charlotte will go into when she talks about Norfolk, kind of how they're setting it up. But the benefits are based on the use of the cooperative, not how much you put into it. Another question that Tana said you wanted to discuss is the nonprofit status of childcare cooperatives. Most of your childcares, I'm going to assume, are formed on a for-profit status. You're either incorporated as a sole proprietor, a partnership, LLC, or some type of a corporation statute. Childcare cooperatives, according to the research that was done by the California Center for Cooperatives, as well as some research that was done by Jeff Yost with the Nebraska Community Foundation, they believe that nonprofits actually offer an advantage to childcares, specifically childcare cooperatives. And there's a few pretty distinct reasons. Number one, according to the IRS, childcare qualifies as education. So because you don't just care for children, you educate them. And so they qualify under the 501c exemption for schools. Or they can qualify. We know of a couple that have been turned down, but you can qualify as long as you meet the regulations of an education institution for childcare. So what you do is you incorporate in your state under the nonprofit corporate statutes, and then you apply to the IRS for 501c3 exemption. This is a real advantage because it gives you a tax exempt status, which can exempt you from sales tax in the state of Nebraska. It makes you eligible for grants from foundations. And it allows individuals to gift you money and in turn receive a tax deductible donation. Members of a nonprofit childcare cooperative still govern democratically. They still pay for the services. One little asterisk is owners cannot have a majority of a financial interest. That's just an IRS regulation. Turn it back over to Charlotte to talk a little bit about the conversation she's had around this.
Are you, sorry, Cindy, I was waiting for the end there. So in regards to the nonprofit status, I would say in Norfolk, they initially wanted to become a for-profit business. That's what they were looking at. And I think many people are. And when they started putting on with the center and the building, and it just became, it was the gap financing, and it just wasn't possible. And so that is what led them to become the nonprofit. They, the group of people that were, the steering team that met on this talked about all the pros and cons, and they chose that.
The next thing is, who are your stakeholders? One thing within cooperative development, we talk a lot about who are your stakeholders within your community. Cooperatives tend, especially in the middle part of the United States, tend to be community-based. So unlike the for-profit business model that talks about stockholders, we talk a lot about stakeholders, the individuals within your community that benefit from the formation of your business. With respect to childcare, there's 4 that are identified. Number 1, the consumers, or you could call them parents. Consumers can also include employers or workers within a community. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute when we get into the different childcare models. I highlighted care providers because in childcare, they tend to be the most important stakeholder and the most valuable stakeholder. They're concerned, they're the ones that care for the children. They have the highest risk, the highest equity contribution, and the highest stake in the outcome of any entity. The next most important are honestly the childcare workers. Even if you qualify as both a care provider and a worker, so you're a sole proprietorship, without employees within this sector, we don't have anyone to care for our children. They need reliable work. As Tana said earlier, you've been having conversations about fair wages. It is a huge conversation nationally within the childcare industry, is how to pay fair wages to childcare workers. They want safe, respectful, gainful employment. They do have knowledge. They tend not to put equity into the business, but their stake, again, just like a care provider, is pretty high, because without the success of the childcare, they don't have a job. The 4th stakeholder are community members, which can include employers, and I would add can include government entities. I know we have 1 state senator on here, so I would even take it so broad as to say the Nebraska Unicameral has a stake in this in our communities. We need childcare in our communities. Charlotte made the comment that she's only had dogs. What I think is interesting, I have a dog as well. I pay more a day to care for my dog at puppy care than I paid to have my child cared for at the YMCA. And she's 25 now, but I pay more a day for my dog than what I paid for my daughter, who honestly, I'm a dog person. Charlotte's a dog person. Dogs are important and valuable. But I think my daughter probably is a little more important than my dog. And I think that says a lot about our values when we're willing to pay more to care for our pets than we are to care for our children. But we need childcare in our communities in order to have an economy. And it's not just about moms, it's about both parents being able to work outside the home and contribute to our economy. And equity contribution can be low to high. Within the cooperative model, the equity contribution of your community will be pretty high, because that tends to be, as Charlotte's going to talk when she goes through the models, who funds the different pieces of a cooperative childcare. And again, stake in the outcome. If you've got great childcare, it's pretty low, but it can be pretty high. My brother owns a business here in Kearney. It's a conversation that we have regularly with people that apply for jobs. You're trying to work around those that have children around their schedules with our schedule, school days out, kids get sick, all of these things happen, and it has a huge impact on our community. Now we're going to get into some models, and I'm just going to introduce these models just so you guys kind of know what we're going to do. And then Charlotte's going to come in and talk about some specific examples, both in Nebraska as well as within some of the research she's done. So the first childcare cooperative model, and honestly the oldest model, is parent-led. It's the most common. It's comprised of parents that come together to provide quality care for their children. Parent-led childcare cooperatives date back to the 1920s. They were initially parent preschools. They emerged out of research in the early 1920s that showed the importance of early childhood education. Members are parents who democratically govern the center. They may hire a child care director to lead the center and oversee staff, or they may volunteer to do that on their own. Parents are expected to volunteer time. This helps to keep costs down within the center because you don't have to pay staff to do everything. Parents may volunteer in classrooms, they may do maintenance, etc., things that you might have to pay for. It's a community of parents and teachers with a focus on the children. And because of this, they tend to have low teacher turnover. It's a partnership. And it's been very successful in some communities.
Thanks, Cindy, for the overview. We actually do have one cooperative, parent cooperative in Nebraska, and that's Montessori Co-op School in Omaha. And as you can see, it started in 1984. It is organized as a nonprofit, and they are currently exploring adding infants to that. Right now, they're at the 18 months to 6th grade, and but that is a goal that they are working towards. And so the board consists of parents. They do have representatives and of the workers or the teachers. One of the things that really surprised me in 1984, they actually have most of their people that work in the cooperative. Some of them have been parents that had children there. Some of them currently have children there, but one of them has actually been there since it started in 1984, and just has a passion for continuing to work and be engaged with it. But they work together to keep the tuition low and enthusiasm high. Comments that we're actually putting a video together right now and examples, working with the California Center for Cooperative Development, and comments that we've heard around parents when they talk about it is they're learning how to be better parents in some cases because they get guidance along the way. The parent cooperatives, grandparents can help with doing things, but it really keeps costs more affordable. And there's usually some type of a sliding scale. It just kind of helps to really engagement, and the workers and parents, it's a collective. And if you ever have a chance to visit the Omaha school, it's just actually exciting to hear the enthusiasm they have of working together. You can just feel it when you're there.
The second common model is workers. They're a group of care providers that come together to operate their own childcare center. Through employee ownership, workers benefit from increased wages, decision-making power, and a share in business profits. Now, this specific model is not eligible for tax-exempt status because the IRS does not allow a worker-owned business to be a nonprofit. So nonprofits, they can have a board of directors, but they can't be organized in a for-profit type model, which this model is. It's a for-profit type business. The workers are the members. They democratically make policy decisions that benefit the workers. They share in any profits through what we call patronage dividends. And again, they are ineligible for tax-exempt status. Worker co-ops, there aren't any in Nebraska. However, we have come across a couple. One is located in Philadelphia.
Right. Thanks, Cindy. And as you can tell, the Worker Cooperative in Philadelphia was formed in 1998. And again, with this research that we're learning, it was the why of they really wanted to form the cooperative was due to infant care. The individuals that formed it found they did not have infant care available, and so they formed that. There are now 2 locations in this that connected to this, and about, I think, a total of 80 slots available, but it's fully owned and controlled by the workers. And it is a nonprofit there's a nonprofit that works in concert with the co-op. And many of the reasons for that are the reasons Cindy addressed earlier in the nonprofit status. Things that the worker cooperatives that they've been able to achieve in Philadelphia are that benefits are provided, and that's what's kept people involved. They vote on the issues themselves, and they all understand and support the decisions. So there's they learn how to collectively make decisions together to work towards things. They found that the level of dedication from the staff is much higher than the industry standards. And because they have a say, a quote that they made is, because they have a say, they stay. And so they have a sense of pride in their business and work together. There's a number of, I think as I saw people writing in the chat, that there's a number of home providers on here. We really don't go into this, but you could explore that, actually working together, what that would look like. And I know there's challenges to home, but you could even potentially purchase supplies together to help keep costs down. Those I'm just throwing that out there as other conversation, things, because again, this the cost for affordable childcare, and so that people are paid appropriately, it is a challenge. And so working together, you can explore many options. And as mentioned earlier, there's really not a bad idea to explore. And that's part of it, working together. If you can make a decision together, you can work towards that.
Awesome. The third model is employer-assisted cooperatives. This is used by employers that include childcare as part of their business benefit package. They usually establish an on-site facility as a cooperative. They may provide the space, they may acquire a space, they may partner with the space, but somehow they provide childcare as a benefit. They initially finance and assist in the childcare programs, but they usually leave the operation and ownership to the employees of the center. So similar to the parent model, they may hire a director. This really does help address childcare challenges that are contribute to workforce shortages. They're a benefit that they can offer to potential employees. It helps with recruitment, retention, absenteeism, especially if you can provide some type of sick childcare as well as school break childcare. They make employees more loyal to a business, increase job satisfaction, and increase productivity. Because if you think about it, as a parent, as long as I know my child is in a safe place, I can focus more on my job and get my job done. Members are employers, but there are some models that bring in parents as members, so they would be employees. It's a strategy that helps employers and otherwise, and I'm able to offer the benefit. And Charlotte's going to talk a little bit more about that in her examples, as well as the Norfolk example of how they offer this as a benefit. Employers share the risks and benefits of providing childcare with their employees. It's rarely free for employees. There's usually a charge, but because employers are involved in the operation, costs can be reduced. Energy Capital, North Dakota.
Okay, thanks, Cindy. The Energy Capital Cooperative Childcare is really one of the first employer-assisted examples. There are actually 8 businesses that work together to assist in it, and they formed they have an operating agreement and started this. And they purchased a local church and remodeled it in order to get it started. One of the things that was key in their success is that one of the larger owners, actually had their employee take charge in leading the remodeling and became the first director. She's no longer there, but she did that at the beginning. The employers are continuing to subsidize the director, and their commitment to the nonprofit was the amount of dollars were based on the slots that were needed. And employees serve along with parents on the board. And so it's a combination in working. And it's, as it shows on there, it started in May 2017. In the research, we've been finding some keys that they said were important to the success is one, having an employee that was able to be tasked with getting this run started. Knowing in North Dakota and many of our rural communities in Nebraska, there's a familiarity with cooperatives, with ag cooperatives. They feel that was a key to their success, that there already was a strong motivation of working together to for unmet needs. And the actual employer that funded this, actually, they have where we have Public Power in Nebraska, they have energy cooperatives, and so that was the benefit, or how they helped to move this forward. People were willing to pitch in the remodel to keep costs down, and the collaboration was key in making that. The other thing that they said was key is that the decision makers, so if the employers are part of this, the decision makers, and they have to be at the table in the initial stages of getting this run and continue investment. When other models of, if the decision makers aren't there, you're always going back to the room and you can't continue. So it's that commitment. And we'll share a little bit more about that, of what I'll add it in here with Norfolk, what I've been, I suppose I'll say, impressed with in their commitment level. They initially, I believe, were meeting weekly once the decision was made to move forward for several months, and then subcommittees, and now they're only meeting as a whole group once a month, but their subcommittees continue to meet to move forward. And so that commitment to help build this effort was critical. The next example is one business that owns, is the employer-assisted example, and an employer-owned, but it's also, the parents are actually, it's more of an parent-employee model, where the parents are really in the business, and it just has some, they help pay for the care, but it's been another way that have been able to keep costs to a minimum, and they help with also some of the work similar to other parent models. And that was formed in 1983. I don't know quite as much about this one yet, but I thought it was important to share. There are examples out there. And even though not in Nebraska, again, it's stretching you to think of all the different ways to do this, and that there are people that, whether they're in Nebraska or not, have gone through this, and those same questions need to be addressed. We may handle it or do it a different way, but it still has to be addressed.
Norfolk, Nebraska.
Okay, so Norfolk, the biggest thing about Norfolk to me, and when you're thinking of where you're at in exploration, I mentioned that they had someone that I would say was a champion that started leading this in Tammy Day with DACOS. I know that many of you heard her speak, or Cindy told me that many of you heard her speak at the Thriving Conference. But if this is a model that you're planning to move forward on, I believe Norfolk would be someone that you'd want to hear from already, their experiences, even though they haven't opened yet and opened. But their goal, as Cindy has written in there, is to create an operating model with business partnerships to provide a sustainable solution to the childcare options. Right now they're in Norfolk, and their long-term goal is to connect to Madison County. They, some of the keys that I've observed, again, is that first Tammy was reaching and talking to C4K, to the Community Foundation. We were asked to come in and just to present the model. Again, they were initially looking at a for-profit center, and the employers were willing to commit. Tammy also thought at the time that it would be her responsibility, and I'm saying this from my perspective. I'm not going to talk a lot about the business, but I'll try to answer questions if you have, but it's ongoing. In fact, they just incorporated as a nonprofit yesterday in the state of Nebraska. They haven't met their IRS exemption yet, but they are working with the community foundation to start receiving money. But the things that Tammy brought up enough information, went to potential businesses that might be interested in this and talked about the model. And what she was relieved about in our conversations early on is she thought she had to have the model defined. And instead, it's more the idea and the concept and bringing the owners together to help create what this looks like and the decisions being made. We had an introductory webinar with many owners on I think it was back in March or April. And from that, the group decided to move forward. She followed up with them again, and that's when they started meeting regularly and made the decision after pros and cons of going to a nonprofit. One of the things that they really wanted to add is to have partners. And so they have what they call provider partners. And they're still working on the bylaws around that, where they're not necessarily paying into that, but they'll be part of this larger collective. And one of their goals is that if someone, let's say, has a shortage and there's openings in one space, that there's a better communication amongst all the providers of the opportunities. They're in the process right now of talking to one-on-one conversations with providers in the area to let them know they're exploring this and what that might look like. Again, their bylaws are not all created. They're working on that. And I know that they'll be following the model from North Dakota, at least, that the dollar amount of contribution is going to be based off the number of slots that are available. And, but they're still working on the bylaws. A lot of things are there, but it's still a work in progress. They have a initial facility. Originally, they were actually hoping they would open a 200 slot location. And part of their motivation, and even in your Buffalo County or wherever, I saw there's people from outside of Kearney and Buffalo County region, is their motivation. Norfolk, at the beginning of the year, had a large provider quit and only gave 2 weeks notice, and they had to find it. Their economic study, I believe, and since I'm not from there, and I'm sorry, I should have had my notes up on this, but I believe they started out with a 500 or 600 slot that they needed that many more spaces. And then I believe it was 100 space place closed. And so the urgency and the employers, everyone really were trying to work together to meet a need, and their willingness to talk and become creative. And so I think that's a key that, Cindy's alluded to, but whenever we try to help, and I know C4K and anyone else is, what is your motivation for doing this? That's critical as you're moving forward. And if there's success that I can see from Norfolk is they've been able to have these conversations, articulate their vision. They anticipate that there'll be other businesses that join in the future. They currently have 7 that are involved, and I believe 2 provider partners are for sure going to be committed, but I'm saying that I believe because it's not in writing yet. They're still in the process of growing, and they're learning together. I could, because it's more about the process, the commitment, they have steering active committees that are continuing to move forward. And I'm just going to say from what Cindy and what we can help with, it's in that guidance. And again, it's the experts in the room. Every community is different, and every community has different assets as to what you need. So Cindy, I don't know if there's more you'd like me to share about Norfolk, but that's the one other thing I would say when it shows the commitment of these 7 providers. They made a commitment of dollars because they have now hired someone to help similar to, not the same way where an employer actually identified a staff person to get the facility opened. In Norfolk, the employers have contributed, and they've hired a consultant or contract person that is going to help to move this forward. And again, what I would say already, which is what has helped them move forward, is their good communication, commitment. They articulated, all voices have been heard and listened to. They've had difficult conversations, and they've been able to come to an agreement on how to move forward. Some of the major players, I think they're on their website, but include DACOS, Norfolk Community College, the Flood Communications, some banks, and the hospital, I believe, is involved. But and again, they anticipate there will be other employers as they move forward. But this initial effort is that they truthfully have, what they wanted was a commitment of the decision makers to put the model together.
Now, I think that's great. So now your questions. I can't see the chat very well, so I'm going to depend on Tana, or we're going to depend on Tana to kind of, or Charlotte, I guess you can see them. What are the questions that you've come up with?
Cindy, right now I don't have any in the chat, so I think we'll just pause for a minute. That was a lot of information. Thank you.
Yeah,
so
do you
much.
feel like you just got fed with a fire hose? Charlotte and I always laugh when we go in and talk to groups, because this presentation, you're like, okay, get it down to 30 minutes. This is stuff we can do over an hour, 2, 3, 4 hours. So we tried to condense a lot quickly, knowing that we're not even going to touch your questions, but we love questions.
Yeah, let's pause for a second. Cindy, I wonder if you want to stop screen sharing, unless you feel like you need it.
Nope, I don't need it.
You might be able to see who's all on the call. All right, we're getting a couple come in here. So first question we have from Lisa and Janet at Family Suites. What childcare rates in Norfolk? What childcare rates is Norfolk charging in order to pay their employees $15 per hour?
One of the subcommittees is working on that now. They want to, again, keep it affordable as much as they can, and hoping with the employer assisted that they, that's helping with that gap. They are hoping to pay more than $15 an hour. And the next question talks about health insurance. That is another goal. I believe that their goal is that all health providers that will have access to health insurance, and they're still working on that. And I say still working on it, that may be a vision. And I should step back. One of the first things they did once they made the commitment of what, I think they probably had 3 or 4 meetings, and they would go around and ask people if this was not the exact question, but if it's wildly successful, what do you want to see, or what will be a result? And out of that, a vision was created. And some of the, as they're building their bylaws and putting their feasibility study together yet, some of that's going to change as it moves along. And again, I can't really address what the rates are going to look like. I know they're going to do their best to make it affordable, but yet we know there's costs. The employers are not paying for all of it. That was one of the suggestions. I'm just going to go, we've mentioned it, and at this time they're not considering, is to potentially have some type of a parent component of that maybe there's a sliding scale that parents could potentially help with some of the upkeep or fundraising or so forth, that maybe that would help make it more affordable. But health insurance is key. And North Dakota, and I'm going to have to go back and do further research, I believe the only one that has health insurance is the director. But in Norfolk, their goal, whether they will achieve that, is yet to be known, because they're not open yet, is that everyone will have health insurance. And I don't know if on the things that I don't know, and whether conversations are, when you think if you're a provider partner, will that create an opportunity that provider partners can have benefits? I don't know. I mean, those are things I'd say they're all exploring.
I will chime in on that a little bit. This is one of the things Jeff Yost with the Nebraska Community Foundation is really concerned about. And he has done some research, and he's got a paper that he has put out that we can share with your group. But by using a nonprofit model, it allows the childcare cooperative to access, as I said earlier, grants as well as certain tax deductions, which kind of covers that gap between what you can charge within your market and what you need to pay, not just salaries, but your other expenses and providing benefits. So if you can find cash to fill that gap, either through community donations, employer contributions, or some other ways, rates don't become as big of an issue to cover that gap because you have other financing opportunities to cover that gap. And it is really one of the number one benefits of a nonprofit cooperative model is the access to those other pots of money that as an in-home daycare provider or a for-profit daycare provider, you don't have access to. You know, the only pot of money you have with the end of all of the money that came out of the CARES Act is basically the fees you charge. So if you can find something to help mitigate that, you can pay what you need to pay, and you don't have to charge an amount that can be burdensome to your community. And
Donna.
Jeff's got a really great chart in here. And I will share this with Tana so she can share it with everyone. But it's one of the things that he's really, and he was involved in the formation of the Child Care Center in Red Cloud, Nebraska, for those of you who know where Red Cloud is. And so he's done a lot of work on the whole nonprofit side with daycares. Shauna.
Yeah.
Donna, you're muted.
Lowered my hand, but didn't take it off mute. One of the, I don't have a question, but to add to Cindy and Charlotte's information they were just sharing about the nonprofit too, and the questions coming in about the rates, like what are they charging parents? If you would think about the benefit of the co-op too, of bringing powers together to share overhead costs, your ability to not also have that higher rates for parents to be able to pay your staff more is an advantage of the co-op. So if there's willing to share the accounting resources or willing to share supplies or materials, things like that, when you think of the overall operating cost of your childcare and you think contributing that all to just parent fees, the one thing besides everything else Cindy and Charlotte has said is that shared resources, being able to pay your staff a higher wage and not have to carry that expense onto your parents. So again, not to focus so much on what those parent fees are, because there's so many other ways to support that overhead operating cost to be able to pay your employees a higher wage.
Thank you, Shauna. I think that was helpful to keep wrapping our minds around what are the benefits of the co-op. I am going to keep moving us on because there's some other really good questions in here, and we only have about 15 minutes left.
Sorry, Tana, one comment I wanted to make is one thing in Norfolk, and since there's so many providers, I think there's a concern and why they're talking to providers one-on-one is they're not wanting to steal from current providers, the employees. They're wanting to build to meet an unmet need, and really trying to create a model that hopefully works best for everyone. And I know there's a lot of conversations, and again, they're working on their bylaws. I think it's going to be interesting to see how any one of the cooperative approach changes over 2-3 years or 4 years, when people are working together.
Thank you. Marisela did ask a really good question. Will this allow providers access to health insurance? Can you touch on that?
It can. Some groups, and this is take advantage of the marketplace, which it's still available in Nebraska. Sometimes within the cooperative, you could form your own group, similar to what most businesses have. And because you form a group of members by bringing in not just so think of it this way, you've got a child care center, but you could also partner with independent providers in your community. If they're members of the co-op, they could take advantage of any benefits offered by the co-op. It's similar to a model that's being used in Cambridge Public Schools, where the child care providers are actually employees of Cambridge Public Schools, so they get to take advantage of the benefits offered by Cambridge Public Schools. So if you form a co-op, you have a benefits package out for your co-op employees, for example, your director, you can essentially carry that benefits package to every member of your co-op. So if you just think about when you put this together, that's one of the things on the start of we want to have benefits for every member of our co-op. We want them to have insurance. We want them to have fair wages. You set these as your goals, and then you figure out a way to access them for your members. And there's lots of ways to provide health insurance within our communities, but it's just one of those things you think about is how can we provide this? And what do we need to do in order to provide this for our employees?
Cindy, this might be a very similar answer, but along those same veins, this group has talked a lot about substitutes and being able to provide work for providers that need a vacation or need to be gone on a Tuesday for a doctor's appointment. What are those benefits? How does that work? And is that something Norfolk has explored, or can you provide any?
I'll let Charlotte answer that.
Yeah. Norfolk is definitely has talked about that. Right now, they're at the level that it's more, the conversations are more with centers, and they are meeting, with providers. But I know that's part of that communication. And from what I understand, there hasn't been a strong network of providers talking together. And so I think if you could have that, and there's software available that potentially people could, that's one model could be, although this is not what Norfolk's looking at. One model could be that the cooperative buys a scheduling software, and that shared service of home care providers are working together, that maybe someone took care of the billing and the scheduling, and then you would know if there was availability, and you can, kind of share in advance with that. And if you do something like that, you would probably want to set that, whatever that group is what standards it is, so that parents would know if there was a substitute, that same standards are being met, whatever that would look like. In Norfolk, on their providers, they are asking that the provider partners adhere to the Step Up to Quality programming standards. And that's, from what I understand, again, this is not my expertise area. That's why we work with people like Shauna and others that are engaged in this area to know those rules. But that's what they're selecting.
Exactly. And I would say, Tana, as you form your group, this is the cool thing about cooperative development. And I know Charlotte can echo this. When you form your cooperative, you get to form it the way you want, with the benefits you want. So if you wanted to form a childcare cooperative in Buffalo County, you could set, again, as one of the goals, that we would have a substitute network. So if an in-home daycare is a member, they get to participate. So they decide to take a vacation. When my daughter was little and in an in-home daycare, when my provider took her vacation, I also took vacation, or I had to find other care. But within this network, Angie Johnson, your face is like in the middle of my screen, so I'm not picking on you, but I am picking on you. Angie takes a week off in July, and then Aaron could take care of Angie's kids for that week, or Aaron and Danielle could, so there's a way that the kids could be cared for by someone else for that week. So it's kind of like a substitute pool, same kind of thing, I think we saw a lot during COVID, or with illnesses, needing to move kids around. You become a network. You're independent, autonomous businesses. You get to keep your, and I've said this in other groups I've met with, each provider gets to stay their own provider as long as they meet the standards of a co-op, if you bring in individual providers. But because you're part of a network, you work together towards some common goals. So you just set those goals up front, if that's something that you need within your community, within your group. And like Norfolk, like Charlotte has said, they've got the goals for Norfolk, but your goals can be different.
Okay, I have one more follow-up question and then I'm gonna be quiet so that there's an opportunity for others to ask questions, but please feel free to continue using the chat too. So when I think about this, I think about who is the support? Like, I think all this is amazing, but is there a support network out there also for the network? So in my mind, I'm thinking about the nonprofit, the NOM is out there to support nonprofits, right? Is there someone, is it you, Charlotte? Is it you, Cindy? Is there someone or somebody that can assist when the group's like, I think we want this, but we really need help, or we need advice, or we need support when we're building this model? I'm just curious what that support network looks like for the network of providers then as well.
That's what Charlotte's putting together. Kim Kuntz, California, Center for Cooperative Development.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think Tana, in relationship, I think that is one of the things that's I think Cindy and I appreciate about being in the cooperative world. There's a nationwide listserv that we can ask if people has anyone had this situation happen and what can you do, and we can get ideas. You can talk to people, and I also think you think of C4K or a foundation. Cindy and I are looking at it from a cooperative perspective, but we're not the people you should go to if you're having questions about childcare itself. We're going to be looking at more at your decision making and such as things like that. So I don't know if that answers, Tana, what you're wanting to know.
I think that's helpful. It wasn't like there's no one there. That wasn't the answer. So that's
No.
good.
And I think that's what's cool about Charlotte's research. This isn't a new model, and we're learning so much, and there are people out there. And Shauna threw a question up: can a nonprofit facilities also be a member of a nonprofit co-op? So I'm assuming a nonprofit co-op can have nonprofit members. I think they can be a partner. I'm not sure if they can be a member. Again, it would go back to your articles of incorporation and how you set up your bylaws, who can be members. And it would also depend on the nonprofit that could be a potential member, what's in their bylaws. Nonprofits, it gets really hazy on how nonprofits work together. That's more of a Jeff Yost question, Charlotte, unless you know it off the top of your head.
Yeah, I think it can be, I was just going to say everything is always gray, and it's even Cindy and I think we've been fortunate to have a number of cooperative grocery stores form. Let's just say that everyone is formed different. Every question is different. Every community wants to do something different. We may have an idea that this is right, but we are not attorneys and we can't answer some of those questions, that we always get clarification because of what Cindy said.
And the state of Nebraska is pretty easy. The IRS is the unforgiving piece here. They're pretty picky. And we run into that a lot with nonprofits and co-ops. But Shauna, if we started to form a co-op, a nonprofit co-op, or a co-op with a nonprofit partner, and there's a nonprofit that wants to be a partner or a stakeholder, I think that's something you investigate and kind of figure out how they can work together and how they can partner.
Well, in Norfolk, just also Northeast Community College is a in their own way a nonprofit. They're not a community college, and they are going to be a member owner of the Norfolk Area Child Care Cooperative.
Yep. So it kind of depends. We run into this with our grocery stores as well.
Sorry, we've only got 4 more minutes, and so I want to be respectful of everybody's time. And I think I saw Maricela was unmuting, and then I thought I saw someone else. I'm not sure who it was. And
we had a question pop in about working hours. My understanding is it depends upon what they're doing. In the Montessori school, it depends on what they do. If they come in for cleaning, there's different volunteer levels. So
And
again, it would depend on exactly what all do you want them to do, and that's to Lisa and Janet.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Lisa and Janet, couldn't we also, that could potentially be a part of the bylaws as well, right? If it's what I'm understanding is that it can be something that you build in, how you want that to look.
How you want it handled. And the nice thing about a co-op, I know other co-ops have talked about this, is you can provide some training through the co-op, which helps to kind of control your costs.
I was just looking at the Omaha one. Here's an example of their committees. They have a work one for maintenance. They have a fundraising committee. So parents can choose a committee to be involved in. They have a fundraising one. They have a marketing one, a recruitment one, events and social, and library. So you could see how in some cases they may not even have to enter the facility. But yeah, you would definitely not want to do anything that caused harm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, with a couple minutes left, I feel like there might be more questions that percolate over the next hour, couple days. I will go ahead and volunteer myself to be that point person for questions. If you'd like to send those to me, I guarantee I will not know the answer, but I can work with Cindy and Charlotte to make sure that we draft up some of those answers to your questions, and then I'll kick it out to the full group, because chances are if you have a question, others in the group have that question as well. But I want to spend just a minute or two here to talk about our next steps as a group, and just kind of get a feel on where do we go next. So my first question is, does this sound, for those of you who are in Buffalo County, does this sound like something you'd be interested in exploring? Okay, I'm not hearing much feedback. Is this all very overwhelming? Maybe is the question to first start with. Is anyone feeling just overwhelmed and not sure how to grasp the information yet? Angie says she needs to know a lot more before even considering it. Natalie is overwhelmed.
You know, one thing I'll just add quick, if people are wanting to learn more, things that Cindy and I can do is also bring people that are working with cooperatives from other states to a webinar, or because of our grant, if it was important, we could even have someone come to Nebraska and maybe spend time meeting with different groups. That just has helped informing many more cooperatives than we have. And it gives us an opportunity to learn more along the way.
Yeah.
I would think Shauna was on the first meeting when I was asked to come and find out about cooperatives. I hope she sees that we've learned a lot more since then.
She did have to hop off, Charlotte, but she did share that she loves that she got to hear it multiple times to help her wrap her brain around it as well. I know I'm spinning a little bit. I'm processing. That's a lot of information to take in.
And we probably cut half of what we wanted to talk about. I'll be honest. And I'm going to echo what Charlotte just said. We know this is a huge topic. Forming a cooperative or forming any community-based enterprise, it doesn't happen quickly. You know, we like to bring groups together, talk through things, do a little bit of visioning, answer all of your questions, and then start to put together your vision of what would be a good solution for your group. We've got several partners. We're more than willing, as Charlotte said, we can bring in people from outside of Nebraska. Charlotte or I can work with this, but we're willing to help facilitate this conversation in whatever direction it needs to go. This is just a taste of, this is what you could put together.
Yeah, and like we gave you the overview, we'd went step by step, because I think you've heard throughout the one of the major things is this collective decision making and visioning is building that trust amongst everyone, that you feel your voice is heard And right now, Cindy and I have been mostly talking, and you've had great questions. But if we're helping facilitate, we need to be silent, because it is your business. It's not ours, and we're not going to be there, and you need to hear from each other. I just think that we may ask questions, but I'll just say in Norfolk, I always try to bring up questions that I think maybe they need to consider. That doesn't mean they consider them or they want to go that route, and that's okay.
So I'm going to propose this because I think we're all a little bit on the same page. I'm not hearing a no. I'm hearing that's a lot. I'm not sure what to think. I'm not sure what to process. So what if we come back at our next collaborative meeting and just debrief and talk about the things we heard, what we liked, and then the questions that we still have? I don't know. I'm open to suggestions.
I'm wondering if it would be helpful to have Cindy maybe join part of that conversation. I imagine what I noticed from the Holdridge group and some other groups that have had this first conversation is it does take about a month to 2 months of talking to your peers and processing and imagining. It's reimagining how to manage so many things that in some ways it felt like there were no options to change, like benefits or how to increase wages. And I think in another 30 days, there'll be more conversations and more questions, and probably questions that Cindy or Charlotte would be the only people that could answer at this point.
Or find someone to answer for you.
Yeah. We don't have this confirmed for sure, but one thing, just so that you know, on November 2nd, it's not confirmed, but November 2nd, we're planning to have a webinar where we would bring in some people that have organized one from other states too, to learn more. Just because we are getting a lot of inquiries, and these kind of conversations need to occur, but that way they'd be available for people to listen to at other times too in more detail.
So we'll share that invite with you, with your group, so you can sit in and, you know, potentially hear from someone else about that webinar.
I really like that idea. So when you guys have more information, I will kick that out to this full group. For those of you who were invited by a third party, please just remember, if you invited someone, to also get that information, because I won't have some other individuals. And I do want to, so November 2nd, I will send that information out. We will plan to have our November meeting, because we will be canceling December's, because it's a busy time of month and many people start to take vacations. So November will be our next meeting, follow up from that November 2nd. I do want to recognize and thank Senator Teresa Ibach for being on our call today. We so appreciate that you were able to take time and listen in and show your support for early childhood in Nebraska. So thank you.
I would just say thank you for the invitation to Denise. I know they're listening to a lot of this conversation challenges me, because I'm kind of leading the effort in the legislature on the child care platform. And so this brings in a whole nother element. I've been wanting to connect with UNL, so this has been a great opportunity to do that. And then I actually read an article when I was still campaigning on co-ops in West Virginia. And it's kind of been in the back of my mind ever since then. And now that I'm kind of the lead person on childcare in Nebraska, that's kind of come full circle with this conversation today. So I'm very involved with other organizations, First Five and a lot of other children's networks, as well as NDE and HHS on a lot of childcare issues. And so this conversation today has been very, very helpful, putting a few other pieces together. And so if anybody has any information or wants to have a conversation with me about childcare, you know, as far as legislation and childcare credits and how they might play into a co-op structure, and maybe how some of the legislation might affect a co-op structure. I'm not guaranteeing I have the answers, but I think I can find them. And so anyway, appreciate the conversation today and appreciate the invitation. And I'll look forward to participating and seeing where we can go with this concept. So thank you all.
Thank you. Tana, I did throw our contact information in the chat, but feel free to share that with everyone as well. You know, we're just an email or a voicemail away from answering questions. But, you know, we're here to work for you.
Perfect, thank you. So what I will do is Cindy and Charlotte, I will wait for your November 2nd confirmation for the time of that webinar. I will email everyone from this group. I will send this recording out. We will plan on that November 2nd information being included. I'll include Cindy and Charlotte's information so that way you all have that. And then also just a reminder for our November 15th meeting. So I think that meeting then can serve as a smaller discussion or debrief on what we've learned today on the co-op model, to start wrapping our minds around that processing, and being able to dialogue. You know, providers, I know you have a lot of insight, information, real world examples on why this would work and why this wouldn't, and how it would work if it were to work. So very excited to hear just a little bit more on a deeper dive at a local level too. So all right, so I'll wait for that information and then I will email out this group. Thank you so much for all of you that were able to attend. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate you.
We appreciate being invited.
All right, have a great day.
Bye-bye.